Welcome into another edition of New Track Record. Caleb Hatch and Justin Kinney with you. This week, recapping the Chevrolet Detroit Grand Prix on the streets of downtown Detroit. Hello, Justin.
Hello, Caleb.
How are we doing?
Oh, we're living the dream. You?
Yeah, I guess I could say the same. Living the dream. I mean, we're here talking about Indy cars. So.
We are. And the first off weekend in a while. Like, we can take a deep breath now after May and recharge a little bit before Road America.
Yes, much needed for the drivers. And, you know, you can even almost argue for beyond just the drivers. Obviously, the crews and the teams, but even the fans, like, in a way. Like, I get it. People say, oh, you want IndyCar racing every week.
I don't. I got too much going on.
Yeah, it is a nice reprieve from the grind that was the month of May leading into Detroit. And look, I get it. You have to have a race after the Indy 500, but you also have to have a break right after to give people some time.
Absolutely. It comes at the right time as we near the halfway point of the season.
Yeah, which, I mean, we're coming up almost to the mid-season and mid-season grades. We'll have that in a couple weeks after Road America, which is coming up on June 18th. But this week, we'll recap the Chevrolet Detroit Grand Prix. Alex Palou of Chip Ganassi Racing gets the win, wins the pole in a race that all the drivers were absolutely crapping on as far as the circuit, and it's too bumpy, it's too tight, it's a go-kart track, all things that Alex Palou had to say about this circuit. And
all boo-hoo stuff.
And yet, he wins the pole, he wins the race.
Doesn't hate it as much now, does he?
Yeah, I don't think so. And I think the track raced well on television as well. So, first off, I was going to go. We had some conflicts pop up, and also the fact that demand for tickets...
You made some bank.
was very high, so did not attend, but made a nice profit on my tickets, so I apologize for being the absolute worst when it comes to that. But it was a nice chunk of change that I could not ignore.
No, which showed the demand for tickets, which is a good thing. And that's one maybe kind of criticism for the races. You never just got a sense of how many people were there. But by indications of you selling your tickets, and that was on the low end of what you got for $500 a piece.
Yeah.
And that was on the low end of what you saw. And so that's encouraging.
Yes, at least listed several days before. Now, I'm not sure about Thursday or Friday, but there was demand. Reserved seats for Sunday were sold out. Saturday was closed leading into the event. Hotels and everything. We'll get more on what Bud Dinker had to say about this event later. But basically, everything turned up positively, and there was buzz for this event. And I don't think you could say the same for Belle Isle. You know, in years past, it was more of what can Penske Entertainment do to assure people upset that Belle Isle, which is a state park, was being taken care of, not only as far as, you know, road closures and that annoying people, but also the environmental impact. And with this, you don't have to worry about those questions. Was the circuit bumpy in spots? Yes. But these are all things that after the first year of a new event, they can go back and try to fix some of the things. But as far as the circuit goes, outside of maybe smoothing out some bumps and some turns and on the straightaway, I think you have a really good circuit. Just over 1.6 miles. The laps are fast. You have plenty of passing zones.
I think just turned 3.
I think this raced quite well on TV. So let's get to our takeaways. And I think the first one for both of us is probably just the fact that all the complaining by drivers going into this weekend, quite simply, not merited, in my opinion. I mean, you have a circuit that, yes, there were bumps. There are bumps on other circuits. This isn't F1. We don't have smooth as glass street circuits.
Totally. You don't have smooth as glass road courses.
No. So I think the circuit held up. It was entertaining. We thought it could be a chaos weekend, especially after the practice sessions and qualifying. And yes, while there are some crashes, it was largely just drivers running out of talent.
Yeah. Especially running out of talent during yellow. And you know what that is. But I thought it raced tremendously well. This is the problem is drivers have too much say sometimes, I think, and they're never going to be completely satisfied 100%. And look, this was Bud Denker knows what he's doing, and it was a course designed for tight environs and not making a mistake and making sure you were aware at all times, even in and out of the pit lane. And that's what was demanded for this race. And by and large, the drivers delivered on Sunday, despite complaining throughout the weekend about it. And it just shows what's possible if everybody kind of works together and make sure at least the majority of aren't being stupid out on course. And it raced well, had multiple passing zones, like you said. I thought it was a successful event. Minor tweaks here or there, but the double-sided pit lane, I think, wasn't the disaster that some people thought it would be. So by all indications, for a first-time road street course event, which always opens yourself up to issues or unforeseen issues coming up, I thought it was very good. It raced well. It went off well. Drivers came out on the other end. I think a big part of it was other series on track and rubbering up the track and stuff like that, and the racing lines and off the racing lines. So I think it was pretty good. It was a good success. Can't wait to go back.
I think also the shot from the dual pit lane of the Renaissance Center in the background, really, really cool to have the rooftop access for fans in the free viewing areas. Bud Denker saying that they didn't close any businesses. They didn't, obviously they had to close streets, but no businesses were closed. You have, 200 countries watching on TV as far as the expansion of IndyCar. They're going to make some changes for year 2. Unclear what the attendance was due to those free viewing areas, but I'm sure you drew more what you drew on Belle Isle. This is just limited. You had a lot more suites. What was it, like triple the amount of suites?
Yeah, it was like 60 some suites that you used. You had the what do they call it? The chalet from the golf course in Phoenix that was there. That was fancy looking.
So they had the party porch. You had the chalets. You had the grandstands. Around 20,000 ticketed fans on site per day. They said they could have had more if they built more grandstands because the grandstands were sold out. And I think that's the thing. You bring it to the people and you have a lot better access than you did on Belle Isle. Obviously, they'll keep the Indy 500 slot as well. But I think as far as track layout changes, not necessary. I mean, can you smooth some bumps? Yes. But overall, I think this is a good thing. And as far as hotels, I mean, this from the Detroit Free Press, but hotels busy, the downtown area. People saying that, Belle Isle, a great venue to host it, but obviously accessibility challenges, sizable uptick in terms of number of people who came to watch. So all in all, positive for the event. Good
for the businesses around there, as long as they're happy and there's a positive economic impact. They're going to want the event to keep coming back. So all in all, and here's the thing with the grandstands, and you don't want to put too many grandstands in and then just not have enough in supply and demand. So maybe they add some more viewing areas next year, considering the turnout for year 1.
Yeah, we'll see moving forward how that impacts it. But overall, good first year for this event, and I think we both felt like there wasn't enough buzz for this moving forward, and I think it definitely delivered as far as the track, the atmosphere, and the amount of fans that came through for year 1. All right, what's your first takeaway?
Was that our collective first take?
I would say so, okay, right?
Yeah, I would, because I would just piggyback off that. So what's your second take? What's number 2 for you?
My second takeaway is kind of two-pronged. First off, Alex Palou getting the race win.
One of the most vocal opponents of the track in the days leading up to the race, and then ended up winning it.
Yeah, calling it too tight, too bumpy, too short. A go-kart track you'd play with your buddies after drinking, or you'd race after drinking. But here's the thing. Alex Palou, I think he's often kind of overlooked because he's maybe not a dynamic personality in the series, but he has a massive lead in the IndyCar Championship after getting punted by Rinus VeeKay in the Indy 500 coming out of the pits. I mean, he had a great car, probably a race-winning car, ended up finishing in 4th, wins at Detroit, won at the Indy GP. He hasn't finished outside the top 5 since St. Pete, where he was 8th. I mean, this is a guy in absolute tear. Now, I get it, things could change at Road America, but he is on an absolute tear. And to have a lead this big, this early in the season, I know a lot of people will say, well, why leave Chip Ganassi Racing? And I think the obvious answer is money. But it will be fascinating to see how this season plays out for him, and also how it plays out if and when we get him moving to Arrow McLaren.
He's effectively a race ahead of everybody else at this point, and is
without double points for the Indy 500.
Right, and trending upward. And if he can continue that, he's going to be very, very tough to beat in the championship. And consistency has been key with Alex Palou, taking advantage of opportunities as well. That's what you need to do to win a championship, and he was very impressive on Sunday. A guy that, could he be a multi-championship winner and leave Chip Ganassi Racing for a team that hasn't won an Indy 500 or a championship at this point in McLaren? Money talks. I know, just asked golf fans recently about how much money talks, but at the same time, his abilities at Chip Ganassi Racing have been very impressive, and for him to chase the money and potentially disrupt that is I think you have to be concerned if you're Alex Palou fan. You hope it continues at McLaren, but it's not guaranteed. But he's on a track right now that, if it continues, is going to win a second championship before moving on.
So I think just the thing to watch is not only on track but off track with Palou, and I think that's kind of my takeaway with him, is that he is driving at an exceptional level this season, and last year you can't deny the fact that, you know, all the off track stuff was probably a distraction. He did his best, but only won the season finale, won that in dominant fashion, and since that race weekend, he's just been on an absolute roll, just being able to move forward past all that.
Yeah, he's been very good. My number 2, let's talk about Pato O'Ward. And has a mistake and then compounds it by making a bad move and crashing himself out in 26th. And I know there's going to be some people that defend Pato O'Ward and some people that are completely against Pato O'Ward, but the last 2 weeks have not been kind to him. Makes a bad move, then blames Marcus Ericsson for it at the 500. He was wrong. And then just effectively impatient while trying to march his way back up through the field on Sunday. I still think Pato O'Ward is one of the elite drivers in this series. He's capable of winning races. But I do think that the next step in Pato O'Ward's development as a driver is being able to be patient when things aren't going his way. And that's what's missing from him. That's what's separating him from a Scott Dixon or a Joseph Newgarden, is when the day isn't going well, is to be patient and maximize the opportunity you have. And he seems incapable of doing that.
I would say it separates him from Alex Palou, and then more recently, Will Power, who became that driver last year
to win a championship. I would definitely agree. And that's the thing with Pato, is he gets in his head too much. He gets impatient too much and makes a stupid move and just makes things worse. And until he rectifies that, it's tough to see him as somebody who can win a championship in his career, because you're going to have a couple races a year where you're just trying to max points, where you're not a top 10 car, or a top 5 car, or a race winning car. You're just in a position where you're trying to max points. And that's where he was this week. And even last week, in terms of maybe being a contender late or in the closing lap or two, is not making a mistake with 7-8 laps to go. And that's what we saw him do.
Well, the Indy 500, I would argue he and Felix Rosenqvist had race-winning capable cars. Whereas this week, you know, the peak for that team was a podium, and Felix Rosenqvist laying it on the podium. But I think for Pato, it's just like you mentioned, consistency, and I think you could jump and make leaps, like Marshall Pruitt talking about, Paul Tracy and the comparison. Look, we have 2 data points. Otherwise, this is not something we think of Pato O'Ward doing. He's aggressive, right? But he normally keeps it pretty clean. It's just this year we have 2 back-to-back data points that say otherwise. So I think it might be easier to jump to that other conclusion.
Right.
But to win a championship, what do you have to do? You have to win races. I get it. Will Power only won one last year. That's the exception. That's
you have to win
normal.
Race.
Yeah.
Not races.
And then finish, you know, constant podiums. Or if you have some less than stellar results like he's had in back-to-back weeks, you got to rip off some wins. And for that team and all the hype, still no race wins this year.
And that's the question we came in when we come into the season, is McLaren has always been this, the last couple of years, been this team ready to make a jump, yet it hasn't been able to. At least it's been winning races with Pato O'Ward. and Felix Rosenqvist in recent years. Can't even do that this year so far, let alone Indy 500s and championships. So Pato O'Ward he needs to stay even-keeled throughout, and that could be a tough thing for sure. But he needs to be able to do that if he's going to be a championship-winning driver in this series.
My number 3. So much has been made about the turnover at Andretti Autosport and the changing driver lineup. Obviously, you have Devlin DeFrancesco is back from last year, Roman Grosjean back from last year, Colton Herta back from last year, but Kyle Kirkwood coming in. He was the guy who we thought, okay, he had a really tough rookie year with Foyt. Obviously was very talented what he did on the ladder, but it didn't have results to show for it, right? I mean, whether it was mechanical failures or him crashing, trying to do too much.
I think that was the biggest rookie. Yeah, I think that was the biggest warning sign with Kirkwood last year is his inability to keep it clean. He had way too many incidents.
He had one top 10 finish. That was at Long Beach. And then beyond that, his best result the rest of the year was a 13th place at Portland. And didn't even, come close to the top 10 the rest of the way, let alone top 5s or podiums. So he really struggled his rookie year. We knew he came in with a lot of talent. You wondered, how would he respond? He's with a team that you would say is obviously bigger. You have a lot more data, historically better equipment, and you come in and what does he show you? And obviously he gets the Long Beach win. But I think what he's shown the last 2 weeks has been more impressive because Long Beach is a track that the Andretti team has been very fast at. And look, if you win the pole there, you have an opportunity to dominate. And he basically did that as Newgarden's tire strategy didn't work in the closing stages of that race. But for Kirkwood, yes, he did crash in the Indy 500. No fault of his own. He was running top 5 at the time. He had a top 5 car, and he was patient, worked his way through the field after qualifying mid-pack. And then this past weekend, where he gets hit from behind by Ilott at the start.
He gets Catherine-legged, basically at the start.
Rear wing taken off. He has an early pit stop. Able to rally back, though, and finish 6th and have one of the quicker cars at the end of the race that if it stays green longer, he could maybe even squeak his way up to a podium position. And I think that drive through the field really showcased, I think, what he's done. Yes, he's 12th in points, but kind of his growth for the last handful of weeks. I think we're seeing a driver. I'm not saying he's going to be a championship contender because I think he's too far removed. But I think we're seeing a guy who could maybe win another race this year. And is he perhaps the top dog in Andretti now? Because he's young, he's talented, like his counterpart Colton Herta, but he's won a race no one else on the team has this year. And I think you could easily make the argument this is the top driver there now.
Well, I think any argument made for him being the top driver at Andretti is more indicative, in my opinion, of Colton Herta and Romain Grosjean than it is Kyle Kirkwood. Now, Kyle Kirkwood has taken a step forward. Part of his struggles last year was running for Foyt, but he was also impatient. We talked about Pato O'Ward being impatient. Kyle Kirkwood was impatient or just overdrove the car too much in terms of incidents. He's been able to nip both of those pretty much in the bud this year, and that's key to development, right? You need to go through those things, and then you hope that Kyle Kirkwood learns from it. We were saying this time last year, that if Kyle Kirkwood can't quit crashing, it doesn't matter what team he's with. Well, he's been able to avoid that this year, at least self-inflicted crashes. Now, he crashed at Indy, like you said, no fault of his own. So he's a guy that's really developed and looked like the part of what could have been a top prospect coming out of the road to Indy. And he's delivered with a win this year and consistency, and really in that upper teens area where he's finished at St. Pete and Alabama and the road course at Indy. And of course has the win at Long Beach in the top 10 at Detroit. So he's delivering, but the fact that we're having the conversation that is he the top driver at Andretti really shows the struggles of the other two guys. And what we were saying 4 or 5 weeks ago is that Romain Grosjean with the start of his season, but he's had struggles with crashes. So the person that I think that we're looking at the most in terms of when does he start driving to his potential is Colton Herta.
And that could change at Road America, right? In a couple of weeks. I think he's a guy who will win a race this year. I'd be very shocked if he doesn't. But when is he going to become the guy that we thought he'd be a couple years ago, where he's not just, winning a race or two, but he's a championship contender.
When he becomes Joseph Newgarden. I mean, he's very comparable in Joseph Newgarden, maybe not with the youth that he started, but in looking at it saying, okay, he's one of the next drivers that are going to win 500s and championships in this series and hasn't been able to do either. And then you're wondering, I know he's still incredibly young, but at the same time, he's becoming a veteran in this series and not being able to deliver in each. So that's kind of a big thing for Colton Herta. I don't think it's time to hit the warning signs, but at least there's some caution in how we look at Colton Herta, and can his career turn out as profitable as we thought it would even last year, the year before.
Well, and to counter that, I mean, he's 23 years old. Pato O'Ward is 24 years old, and they just recently had birthdays. So, I mean, these are two young guys. They're two stars, but at the same time, is it just the simple fact of this series is so competitive? You have to be, experienced. And I guess the counter is that Marcus Ericsson, became a championship contender last year in season number 4. So that's maybe the exception, not the rule. But for a lot of these guys, it takes several years. I mean, for Newgarden, right? I get it. Right. He was on lesser teams to start his career, smaller teams, but the first year he was even a contender was 2016, and that was is his 5th full season?
Yeah.
So it takes some time.
It does, absolutely. But I think it almost, we shuffle the deck with that Andretti team every weekend on who's the alpha, and it's between 3 drivers, and it seems like more and more this season we're going with Kyle Kirkwood coming out of weekends as saying the alpha at Andretti.
All right, what's your third takeaway?
Well, let's talk Graham Rahal.
Yep.
We talked about miscues at a new track. It happens, but the only one that happened under yellow was Graham Rahal. And I'm wondering when we reach a point when somebody says about Graham Rahal, instead of, oh, you feel bad for him because he's with an underperforming team, you say, I feel bad for him because his best is behind him. And I know you can point, he tried to point to the car being some sort of issue, but you crashed under yellow and crashed hard. It wasn't like a narrow, you put it straight into the wall. And I just wonder when somebody's going to put it out there that's like, look, Graham Rahal is just, it's not there anymore. And going to Ganassi or going to wherever, like people want to say, could be an option. Does it really save him at this point? Because he's shown nothing, next to nothing recently at Rahal, Letterman, Lanigan. To be fair, it's a team that struggles. I get it. But at the same time, the drivers aren't blameless. People want to blame Jack Harvey for his performance at Rahal, Letterman, Lanigan. But apparently Graham Rahal is immune from criticism. And he's been arguably, at least in the last couple of weeks, worse than Jack Harvey. I just don't know when and where it turns around, if it ever turns around for Graham Rahal. And last weekend was the most recent example of a guy that just looks completely lost. Not a team, the team's lost, but a guy, a driver that looks completely lost.
Detroit, now granted, this is a different circuit, but Detroit is where Graham Rahal had his last wins because he swept doubleheader weekend in 2017. And yes, he's been competitive since then, but this year he just seems like a different driver. Remember last year, he was slow to start the season and then rallied and late, had a really good second half of the season. Could that happen again? Yes, but we've also never seen from Graham Rahal what we saw last weekend. Is that a one-off? Is it just, eventually catches up to everyone kind of thing?
Right.
Or is that a sign of things to come? I think that's something that's going to be curious to watch because, look, if I'm Graham Rahal, I find a way to go to a different team for 2024.
I mean, at least try something,
yes.
Right? And at the very least, it galvanizes you to see what you still have. But it's a dude that hasn't had a podium since 2021, Texas. And that's a long time for a guy that's considered where he's at in the sport. And it's been struggle. It's been a lot of struggles. I think you go somewhere else next year to just try to find something, but I do feel we've reached a point that you can't keep blaming just ROL. You have to start pointing the finger at Graham Rahal and say he's not as good of a driver as he used to be. Is that because he's past his prime? Is it because he's just been dragged down by the struggles of Rahal, Letterman, Lanigan? I'm not sure. But there's no denying the fact that Graham Rahal has declined in driver prowess. We can say it about Jack Harvey. We can say it about Graham Rahal. They're the same team.
Other notes from the weekend: Felix Rosenqvist getting the podium, battling with Alexander Rossi. Rossi saying, we'll discuss it internally as far as their contact.
I thought it was fair driving.
I thought it was hard racing. Personally.
Here's my thing with that situation. If the situation is reversed, Alexander Rossi is doing the same thing Felix Rosenqvist was.
Correct.
And that's what should be said behind closed doors. So any problem Rossi has should be squashed by the fact that, like, Alex, if you were in Felix's position, you would have done the very same thing.
Romain Grosjean, who crashed on his own while running, top 3, I believe?
Yeah.
Definitely top 5.
He was in third at that point, I thought.
He crashed, and Scott McLaughlin said that Grosjean destroyed McLaughlin's top 5 chances, just drove straight into him. I mean, they had contact. I think the problem with this circuit is it's hard to know as far as what guys had, suspension failures, and that caused their race to end.
True.
Or, was it something else? Because you can blame the bumps on the circuit only so much. And part of it is we simply don't know. Like, some guys said they had a suspension failure, and we'll get to that in our tweets of the week. One in particular, that being Romain Grosjean. But how much is it the suspension issues? I mean, if Colton Herta can drive around with a broken front wing for 20 some laps and then drive the final 2 with like half a front wing and still end up finishing 11th, like, you can wheel it. You're a professional driver.
Yeah, you figure it out.
Kirkwood had 4 pit stops, still finished 6th, where everyone around him had 2.
Everybody had 2. So you have to be better. Excuses are, everybody's got one, right?
Other notes from this race: for Alex Palou, becomes first driver eligible for the People Ready Force for Good challenge if he can win either Iowa or Gateway. So he's won at, let's see, the road course at IMS, obviously won Streets of Detroit, so he needs the oval, won the oval pole. But that was also his first street course win.
Very impressive.
Which is hard to believe.
Yeah. Did either of us pick Palou last week?
I don't think
I picked
so.
Power.
I
remember.
I think I picked Herta, which did not work out.
I looked okay with Power for a while, but no. It's all good. Nobody said we were smart.
Yeah, well, that's definitely not. Also, this from Chad 200. Alex Palou, 5th driver in history to win the Indy 500 pole, then win the next IndyCar race from pole position, joins Rick Mears in 1989, AJ Foyt in 75, Bobby Unser in 72, and Mario Andretti in 1966. That's a little bit different, though, because they all won at Milwaukee.
Yes, a little bit
still
different.
Still is interesting. In fact, you could almost say it's, in a way, more impressive because it's a completely different type of circuit.
True. I would agree. Meanwhile, the hangover for the Indy 500 winner continues. A 10th place finish for Joseph Newgarden. No driver has won or finished in the top 5 immediately after the Indianapolis 500 since Juan Pablo Montoya in 2000. So now 24 years since not just a win by the Indy 500 winner the week after, but even a top 5.
The most impressive would have been 2017 in Detroit because Takuma Sato won the pole for one of those races. And remember, that was a doubleheader back then.
Correct.
And Sato was third and then pole, but he had a pretty solid race weekend, 8th in race 1. And then in race 2, he won the pole, ended up finishing 4th. And that's really kind of the high water mark since then. But either way, it just shows how difficult it is. In a top 10 finish for a driver after Indy, I mean, that's really good. It's just the reality of where we're at.
They're just trying to survive the week of media chaos, right? And Joseph Newgarden wouldn't give it up for anything. He just powered through Detroit weekend. Now he gets a week off.
Meanwhile, can't believe we didn't talk about this, but Flava Flav.
The big I guess scene stealer of the weekend.
He was at Detroit, was seen with Will Power doing the parade lap.
Had a Will Power shirt on, was front row in the bleachers, the closing laps on Sunday.
Multiple interviews, which, again, always going to promote yourself, right? But that was really cool to see, and I think that was kind of one of the highlights from the weekend. Not drivers complaining about the track, the fact that Flavor Flav was there and suddenly became a big IndyCar fan.
Yeah, let's see if it continues outside of the weekend, but wouldn't mind having a member of Public Enemy part of the paddock.
No. And then in Indy Lights / Indy Next, Nolan Siegel had a 5-second lead, a half shaft broke while he was leading the race.
It's like 2 laps or 2 corners to go.
Yeah. And Reese Gold got the win for race 1. Nolan Siegel goes back and wins race 2. So good for him, the bounce back, but just a brutal way as he was that close to a win.
And very competitive season so far for the series formerly known as Indy Lights.
There doesn't seem to be like a clear favorite. I think that's what makes it interesting. Usually you get this far into the season, there are 1 or 2 guys who you think, okay, they're going to be challenging for the championship, but it still seems wide open.
It does, particularly with the multitude of drivers that have wins or can win in this series. It's pretty impressive.
All right, TV rating time.
Yes, sir.
So, a lot of good news on this as far as the race itself. 0.65 rating, 1.047 million viewers.
Over a million. Check
Over
mark.
a million. That's a check. That's up from a 0.23 rating and 354,000 viewers last year on Belle Isle. But again, that was on USA Network.
Okay.
So
that's up.
It's hard to compare. Second highest NBC viewership average on the season, St. Pete, just under 1.2 million. So that's a positive, especially because it felt like everything was trending down after St. Pete. St. Pete was positive.
Yeah.
And then you're thinking, okay, where'd all the people go? Then as far as the total audience delivery, 1.098 million viewers, most watched race since St. Pete, which had 1.223 million. So when you include streaming, so streaming accounted for like over 50,000, which is positive. It was their most streamed race on Peacock, second most streamed IndyCar race on record on Peacock.
Pretty impressive. Good week of TV ratings for IndyCar.
Now that excludes the Indy 500.
Yes. Well, yes, of course.
And Peacock exclusive races, to be clear.
True. Of which we'll have one this year.
And up 2% on viewership through 7 races this year compared to last year. Now, obviously,
up is up.
The Indy 500 being up is the key. It was up over last year, and last year was kind of down as far as the rating goes. So that's a positive.
You just need that slim margin. Hopefully, IndyCar can grow it through the summer and get some more decent numbers and up from last year type races and get a little bit more comfort zone. But up is up. And 2% isn't high, isn't mega, but it's better than 2% down, right? So, as we say here, up is up. It's good news.
That's right.
Now, if it finishes down 4%, then it's a different conversation, but up is up.
So if you agree or disagree with us, we'd love for you to interact with us. You can find us at newtrackrecordpodcast.com. While you're there, sign up for the email list. It is free. You'll never miss an episode or any special announcements we have to make. Free to subscribe. You can also check out the store. We have t-shirts and stickers for sale there. You can find us on social media, IndyCar Podcast on Twitter and Instagram. On Facebook, just search for New Track Record. And you can email us, newtrackrecordpodcast@gmail.com. You can support us via Patreon, patreon.com/newtrackrecord. Thanks to Xavier, Rob, Stitch, and several others for their generosity each and every month. And as always, you can listen in for free. Download us for free on your favorite podcasting platform, Apple, Spotify, Google, Amazon, whatever you prefer. And you can find us and listen to us on there. Time for the mailbag. This from Jeremy from HBG. Championship talk, talking about last week's episode. Yes. Let's talk championship. Palou, 51-point lead over Marcus Ericsson.
It's over.
No, there's a lot of time.
It's like Max in Formula One. It's over.
Justin Newgarden, 70 back, and then it gets a lot more dicey. Dixon is, 79 back. You have Pato Ward in 5th, and he is, 82 back.
Yeah.
So, and then Rossi in 6th, 97 back. To put it in perspective. So Palou is just off to a dominant start because he hasn't finished outside the top 10 and he hasn't finished outside the top 5 since the opening race of the year, which usually that means you have a tough race coming. That's just the reality. But if he continues this tear at Road America, I'm not going to say the championship's over, but it's going to take a lot of bad luck for someone to catch up.
Well, it's what it's going to do is really lessen the candidates as it goes forward. So If Palou can continue to put good results and other drivers behind him can't match it, you're going to find that you see that distance grow, not just for second, but also looking at 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th. Like, you start falling 120, 130, 150 points behind as you get through the summer. It's going to be tough to make that up in the closing races. So the drivers not only need Alex Palou to have a bad weekend at some point, but take advantage of that and close this thing up, because Alex Palou's off to a great start, but far from over, definitely.
A lot of people had some snarky replies that we'll get to in tweets of the week as far as
listeners being snarky.
Yes,
never.
Right. As far as who wins the race, and we had a lot of good stuff that we'll say for that. Let's get to rate the race. How would you rate this one? First year of an event. I was struggling with kind of coming up with a good number, because each race you can't rate compared to like the previous race, right?
Yeah.
So it's its own entity, its own rating.
Arbitrary. Yeah, you have to do a different judge of it. I had it as an 8 for new track, the uncertainties going in, the concerns with potential chaos, of which I don't mind chaos. You and I, neither of us do.
I don't either. I mean, I'm good for that 1 or 2 races a year.
Right. Everything factored in. There was more passing than expected. There was action up front late. I gave it a solid 8.
I'll go a little bit better, 8.5. I mean, you had tons of passes for the lead. You had intrigue. It was a good event. I don't hand out 9s and 10s that easily.
Willy-nilly?
No. To get a 9, you got to have like a pass at the very end, like that. I mean, along with every other factor being perfect. But yeah, 8.5. I thought it was a very entertaining race. It's very different going from the Indy 500 to a street race, but I think it was entertaining, and I think it was a good event. And I'll be curious to see if that buzz, if it grows in year 2 or if that was a blip. And that's the hardest thing, right? Year 2, that's the hardest as far as having a new event is, what do you get coming back? But a lot of great responses on this. Autosport Lab, 7.5, great race, crappy track.
It's a good track.
Hunter J. Smith, 03, gave it a 10. H. Sabedra gave it a 10 out of 10, much better than expected. Game NMTX1 gave it an 8. Probably butchered that, but that was what I had to work with there. Elsewhere on Rate the Race ratings, A Knight _210 gave it a 9. Aaron Bear 317 just posted the average of points earned by full-time cars for teams. Standings after Detroit, Chip Ganassi Racing in the lead. No surprise.
Yep.
SCTJ 910 absolutely enjoyed every minute. Plenty of passing and action. Playing spades, 7 out of 10 based on the race. 10 out of 10 for the Palou and Power podium. Big D Kart race action 6. Fun at the race 9.9. Hunter's Way 67 7.5. Not a Palou fan, so that brings it down for me. However, it was entertaining. How was Dixon not penalized for basically punting Will Power? Rossi versus Rosenquist was spicy. Felix knows he's out at McLaren, so might as well go for it. I don't know. Was that Dixon thing? I mean, on one hand, Dixon did hit him from behind.
Right. It was tough to me to find it as egregious as some people did.
Especially because it's on a restart going into a corner. I mean, it's not like he punted Power into the wall.
Yeah,
and then Power got him right back as far as some side-by-side
I thought it was, there was no harm really done there because Power got him back pretty easy.
I am Analog, giving an 8. Expected a little more chaos, but I guess 1/3 under caution will limit that. Good teammate battles. NK Harden gave it a 9. Multiple passes for the lead. Great racing through the field. Stayed green for the final few laps. Only thing keeping it from being a perfect 10 is the drivers forgetting how to turn. At least 4 guys just stuffed it straight into the wall for no reason. Amateur. Yeah, I mean, drivers are so worried about the track, but look, I like these tracks because you have to limit your mistakes, right? It's about precision. Alex Palou is very precise. And we haven't talked about him, but Agustin Canapino, once again, stays out of trouble, finished 14th, qualified 20th. I get it. He's not having a great year as far as the point standings go, but this guy continues to impress week after week of just doing his job. And anytime you can finish in the top half of the field, I consider that a huge positive for that team in that entry.
Something that Callum Ilott has kind of struggled with here or there. I mean, we all know the potential of Callum Ilott and stuff, but Canapino has been, you could say, a better driver in the sense of doing what he needs to do, keeping it out of trouble, bringing home an entire car, and learning on the fly. He's exceeded expectations. Now I was thinking about this over the weekend when I was watching this race. In terms of the Rookie of the Year battle, Marcus Armstrong is leading it, right? And even Devlin's a second-year guy. But you know how we have Rookie of the Year at Indy at the 500, and it's not based on finish all the time like it should be, but it isn't. I don't see how Augustine Canapino is not the Rookie of the Year, in my opinion. And I do all credit to Marcus Armstrong, and I know even he's ahead with not doing 2 races, and he may do the rest of the ovals the rest of the season. But the impressiveness of Augustine Canapino in staying out of trouble, in learning, in earning the respect of drivers. Like, this is a guy that had never driven an open wheel car. He'd driven a lot of cars in his life, but not an open wheel car. I feel to me he's the Rookie of the Year, and that's not taking anything away from Marcus Armstrong. I just feel what the expectations were for Augustine Canapino and what he's done has been night and day, and I've been so impressed.
Very impressed with what he's done, and the fact, yes, he did have a crash in the Indy 500, but I mean, it wasn't his fault.
Right.
He didn't crash on his own or take someone else out. That's impressive enough in and of itself as a rookie. I think for him, you just wonder, because he's still learning all these tracks for a first time, will he ever get, like a top 10, top 12 result?
Right.
Like, unless there's just a race where there's a lot of attrition. And yes, he's had those races. I mean, he was 12th, I guess, in his first 2 races, but that was due to a lot of attrition in those. When is his breakout race coming?
I don't know if it's this. You mentioned top 10 or top 12. Hell, he finished 14th this past weekend. He's close.
And that's, this past weekend is the kind of race that you would expect him to crash or have issues or go into the runoff area. And he's not making those mistakes.
No, you mentioned the word precision and how precise you need to be on these tracks. And I know everybody was kind of in the same boat this weekend, first time on this track. But the fact that Canapino went through the entire weekend and didn't put a wheel wrong in the sense of a major crash is just, it's so impressive. And I just don't think we're appreciating just how impressive it has been through the first half of the season for Augustine Canapino.
Continuing on with Rate the Race from M. Rusamarov, definitely a strong 9. Happy for Will Power. Can't thank you for your podcast. Well, thanks for listening. Poet Shevchenko gave it an 8. Best straight course race this year. Track is set up surprisingly well for good racing. There were passes for position at almost every turn. Most of the L's were just brain fades by drivers, I think. Yeah, I think I would fully agree. DeGuerra gave it a 7, surprisingly good with plenty of overtaking. Also for the lead, the driving standards are poor here and there. It was obvious guys like Robb and Peterson wouldn't make it through this race without incidents. The track is missing at least one fast corner. It's a good point. There aren't fast corners here, but they're restricted by the layout.
It's a city streets. Yeah. There aren't very many fast corners in downtowns anywhere.
The track is the track.
Yeah.
Jamin T14, solid 8. Tough racing with minor chaos, but not the melee some predicted. Jeremy from HPG gave it an 8 on the entertainment scale. Grosjean an award getting -5 for the driving skills. Mark_Mark_run, 7.5 good action, but a little bumper car-ish at times. Beans B-Card blog gave it a 6. Too many cautions. The track is too narrow. And we did have an entry via Facebook as far as rating the race. Let me pull that up as far as this. I expected a 5. This is from Warren. I expected a 5 or 6. I gave it an 8 or 9. It wasn't the Nashville Smash Fest I expected. So there you go.
No, it was not. The professional race car drivers drove like professional race car drivers on Sunday. At least the majority of them did.
So that's a look at Rate the Race. Other things to get to in the mailbag this week. And again, a lot of stuff, a lot of people sent in that will definitely be on tweets of the week because it was that good of content. R. Cole said, okay, time to celebrate. First time in first. Thank you, Alex Palou. Hashtag isn't May yet. And that's Buddy Rice-A-Roni. So
congratulations.
Leading the Fantasy IndyCar League. I'm not sure where I stand, but I know it's very mid-pack.
I'm very bad because I missed 2 races.
I think I missed 1.
It's not bad if you miss 1 and you're still mid-pack.
Yeah.
But we'll keep track of those standings throughout the summer.
Absolutely. This from FitJ1983, talking about Detroit. Drivers did a great job keeping the race mostly clean. I will say that I met more first-time in-person watchers of an IndyCar race than any race I've ever been to except Nashville. Hope that grows in the future.
That's great.
Nashville, a lot of buzz the first year, and then the second year was hampered by weather.
This will be pivotal.
This is the pivotal year 3 for that event.
Are you planning on going to Nashville this year? Undecided.
We'll see.
Gotcha.
So that wraps up the mailbag. News and notes time. Not a whole lot to get to. Something we didn't get to in the TV discussion. Adam Stern of Sports Business Journal posted the top-rated local markets for the Detroit race. 4.7 for Detroit. That's really big.
That's
Indianapolis got a 2.9. Knoxville, Tennessee, a 1.5. Fort Myers, Naples, a 1.4. Milwaukee, a 1.1. Louisville, 1.1. Greenville, South Carolina, 1.1. Nashville, 1.0. Dayton, Columbus, and Cincinnati, also 1.0. So that's the top 10 for the ratings on there.
It's interesting because I don't remember the top 5, traditional top 5s, Detroit's not in there. So there's a lot of interest, not just people going, but people watching in Detroit too. And hopefully they liked what they saw and maybe will consider going next year.
Speaking of upcoming events, the Big Machine Music City Grand Prix in August. This is interesting. I saw this. So they're doing a skip the line thing. So 3-day ticket buyers granted premium access to skip the line on Broadway's, most popular venues on Friday and Saturday nights during race weekend. They have fast pass wristbands on site at guest services tents. So if you're going to go, that 3-day ticket gets you some special access. I think that's a really unique idea, especially for that event.
I would definitely agree.
Elsewhere on news and notes, AJ Foyt Racing tweeting out, and we forgot to get to this, I think, last week, but they raised over $3 million in donations for Homes for Our Troops with their Indy 500 campaign. ABC Supply matched $1 million of those donations. So very, very cool, the success they had with that campaign.
Excellent job.
Elsewhere on news and notes, the Lionheart documentary is debuting at the Tribeca Film Festival this Saturday. So, see, that is what, June 10th?
Yeah.
Yes, June 10th. HBO released on streaming TBA, according to Arnie Shribben of IndyCar. In fact, this weekend, also big in the world of racing, the 24 Hours of Le Mans and LeBron James, official starter. So you get one of the biggest athlete superstars in the world as the official starter.
Well, if he can go to Le Mans, he can go to Indianapolis.
Right?
Although it's easier when you're not in the middle of a season to go to Le Mans.
That's true. And, talking about the Dane Weldon documentary, his son, Sebastian Weldon, first career win, victory in Skip Barber last weekend at Virginia International Raceway. So congrats
first
to him.
Of many, I imagine.
In the car. Now, obviously, he won a lot in karts, but this is his first car win. So
correct.
Congrats to him. Elsewhere, Mario Andretti, a couple F1 ties to the Indy 500. Mario Andretti saying he will persuade Max Verstappen on coming to the Indy 500 and seeing him in the race. And meanwhile, Charles Leclerc had a Gazzetta interview. This translated. Big takeaway. He'd love to drive the Indianapolis 500.
Ah.
So that translated, I think, from what? Italian. So keep that in mind. Throw another F1
fun.
driver who's interested.
Sure, why not?
I think he would definitely be welcome. All right.
Does that mean Ferraris come into IndyCar? Is that what you're saying?
No.
Oh.
No, we played that game before.
Yeah, we have.
But we do have some notes as far as some interesting tidbits from the Racer mailbag. Marshall Pruitt. Rick Hendrick. Could he come to IndyCar? Marshall says, can't say if Hendrick is headed full-time to IndyCar, but it doesn't seem like a complete fantasy. And another note as far as third OEM. So you joked about Ferrari, but Toyota. Penske Entertainment came close with Toyota, going as far as to offer them help with supplying major components from Ilmor Engineering, which Penske co-founded and co-owns and makes supplies Chevy's IndyCar engines. But the timing didn't work out. Provided Penske Entertainment is willing to make similar offers to other manufacturers, is a big help in terms of saving costs on ground-up development and time to bring those engines to reality. And while there are always conversations taking place between the series and manufacturers, I've heard nothing to suggest a third is on the way.
So not only helping them financially, but we'll give them parts from other companies.
Whatever
like
works.
Ilmor is a Chevy, basically.
Yes. Whatever helps. All right. Time for tweets of the week, and we have several We start off with a lot of people very snarky about who wins in Detroit. Indy Nathan said the pace car.
Which was, I didn't think so. A pace car wasn't out there as much as we thought it would be.
And no pace car crash.
No.
Meanwhile, Adaptive Bomb said the walls in turn 3. Not as bad.
Not as bad as we thought it'd be.
Is Indy 500 today. Delora. They probably did win.
Probably.
And then these two comparisons. So first from Romain Grosjean himself. Suspension failure. Guess the track wasn't made for our car. Tony DeZeno tweeting, at least the 28 is consistent. And then finally, final tweet of the week from the Team Penske Team Twitter account, flavor of the weekend, and it's Flava Flav with Roger Penske. Some pictures there.
Flava of the week. Flava.
Yeah, well, they did say flavor, but they should have said flava.
They say flava of the week.
Of the week. Absolutely. All right, time for our random split era driver of the week.
All right, we're going back to the early days of the Indy Racing League and going with Johnny O'Connell. Who you said have heard from him.
I have.
Yes, which he only raced 4 races over 2 years in the IRL, so very impressed that you know who it is. But he's actually the most successful GM factory racing driver. He has raced in the Pirelli World Championship, won multiple drivers' championships over the course of that, some Le Mans as well. But just did 4 races in IndyCar over the course of 2 years. Started off in Cunningham Racing in 96. Actually had a top 5 at Phoenix that year. And then through 96, 97, that season, that of course carried over both years, Treadway Racing. He was 12th at Vegas and then did not qualify for the Indianapolis 500 with AJ Foyt in 97. So his only Indy 500 start was in 96 and finished 29th. So 4 official races made, a top 10 at Disney World, your favorite all-time race, and a 5th at Phoenix, and then a 12th at Vegas, and a 29th at the 1996 Indianapolis 500. After that, did a lot, as we said, with the 24-hour Le Mans, and did a lot of racing with the Pirelli World Challenge as well.
4 class wins in the 24 hours. Very impressive. Best finish overall was a 5th in his first year. That was driving the IMSA GTS class. So he is largely in that class or GT1.
Yeah.
So a secondary class, but still a lot with Corvette over the years with his success. But again, to win your class at 24 hours of Le Mans is very impressive.
And he's done it, at least with the GT, pretty good. So Johnny O'Connell, he's a native of, is it Poughkeepsie, New York?
Poughkeepsie.
Is that how it is?
Yes. Poughkeepsie.
I know, I've heard of Poughkeepsie. I just never thought of how you spelled it. But still with us, 60 years old, did 4 races over 2 years. Mr. Johnny O'Connell, this week's Random Split Era Driver of the Week.
And speaking about his success in the 24 hours of Le Mans, let's get into the IndyCar drivers, past, present, as far as people to keep an eye on this weekend. Sebastian Bourdais and Scott Dixon with Cadillac and Chip Ganassi Racing this weekend. Tristan Vautier, the replacement for Jacques Villeneuve for Floyd Van Wall Racing Team. He will compete. Esteban Guerrieri, former Indy Lights driver, will be a part of it as well. Andre Lauderer, didn't he have a start at one time in Champ Car?
Yes. He's been a Random Split Era Driver of the Week.
So he's another guy.
2002 kart.
There you go. Another guy competing. And I'm sure I'll probably miss a few here. Mike Conway with Toyota Gazoo Racing. He's been with them for a long time. Had a lot of success there. Continuing on, drivers to keep an eye on. Let's see. You have several former F1 guys. You have Ryan Briscoe. Used to be with Ganassi and Penske and several other teams in IndyCar. He's with Glickenhaus Racing. You also have in LMP2. So that was just the top category, the hypercar. 16 cars in that category. Then in LMP2, as far as guys to keep an eye on, Ben Hanley with Nielsen Racing. Obviously was with Dragon Speed. Pietro Fittipaldi ran a couple of races with Foyt. He's with Jota in the Recca chassis. So a name to keep an eye on there as well. And looking elsewhere, this category, lot of entries. This is a huge event. I can't stress enough as far as how big this is. Simon Pagenaud will return with Cool Racing, that category. So he's back at the 24 Hours of Le Mans in his home country as well. And then continuing on to the GTE AM, which is 21 cars. As far as the look at drivers with IndyCar connections here. And I've skipped over guys who've done IndyCar tests too, because I've seen several names pop up. Oh, I remember they did a test with this team, a couple years ago. There are just a lot of names. Really no one in this category, surprisingly, with an IndyCar tie-in. And then, of course, Garage 56, the innovative car, the NASCAR Hendrick Motorsports team with the Chevy Camaro, Jimmy Johnson, a part of that. And then you have reserve teams as well. So either way, this will be interesting to watch as LeBron starts the race, and to see, I think that NASCAR entry will be fascinating to watch.
I agree.
For us to see how they perform.
Yeah, a lot of intrigue for Le Mans, and of course a big year for Le Mans in celebrating such a milestone too.
So that wraps up this week's episode. We'll be back next week, hopefully with some silly season updates.
Let's get some silly season updates, some international race updates, some third OEM updates. Let's do the trifecta next week.
That's all to come next week. For Justin Kinney, I am Caleb Hatch. This has been New Track Record Podcast.
Podcasts by Federated Media.